got to be frustrating for you personally to read something like this, where there's him attacking you, but then admitting as the article goes along that you can make a case.
I said, I've read The Atlantic in the past and enjoyed it, but it just seems to have gone sideways, and I don't understand why. And he said, well, we're credible, and we're going to do this. And he said that he just wanted to do a deep, detailed dive into all the documents. And foolish me, I believed him. And even in our most recent correspondence, I said, I really hope that you're not going to do an attack piece. And he responded, oh, no, I'm not going to do a attack piece. It's going to be fair and balanced and, and objective. And this is the work product.
It's just a big bunch of contradictions. Welcome to KLTV.news. I am happy and proud to welcome back Dr. Robert Malone. He's a pioneer of the technology behind the COVID-19 vaccines, but we still have places contesting that you're a pioneer of the COVID-19 vaccine. So what's that like, constantly having to defend yourself? You have the receipts. I've seen all of your proof that you were a major contributor to the fact that these are even out. So what is that like, constantly having to defend that?
Distracts away from the core issues. I mean, the issues, this isn't about me. It shouldn't be about me. It should be about what are the issues here and what are we going to do about them. I'm increasingly a mouthpiece, a microphone for physicians and scientists all over the world that are incredibly frustrated, afraid of being targeted, afraid of being censored, afraid of character assassination like I'm taking. But I'm a big boy. I've been on social media for decades, and I guess I've grown kind of a thick skin. And I've always been, as the Atlantic article points out, I've always been somebody who's willing to take a stand and not back down. And I guess that's part of my brand. And I don't apologize for it. It's, as Popeye once said, if you're that old, I don't think you are, I am what I am.
All right, so Dr. Malone, I was just going to dive into this article. It says Malone was riffing on a botched sentence in USA Today article, one that was later deleted, but not before being screenshotted and widely shared. So it's like the premise of this whole article is calling you out for saying something that was misinformation, but then right there admitting that this all came from a USA Today article that's screwed up. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's really that article, that whole premise is out of date. The data, the USA Today quote was an early reveal of some of the information that's coming out of Israel right now, and then also out of the UK. And the young gentleman, I think this may be one of his first articles that wrote this. He's not, calling him a journalist, frankly, I don't mean to cachet, but he's new to this business. And clearly he was asked by his editors to put together an attack piece here. He's been interviewing me and my wife and many of my colleagues for about a month and a half to 2 months. And this is the work product. So what he's talking about here, I believe, is the issue about antibody-dependent enhancement. And he goes on to reference obliquely. I don't think he even understands what antibody-dependent enhancement is, but he refers to that the vaccines might be causing worse disease. I've just sent him, there's a whole bunch of statements in here where he just doesn't understand the information and the facts that are being provided to him. And I think this is a problem. I've seen this before with other fact checkers. These young, they're not really trained as journalists, and they're brought in to write these kinds of attack pieces, I suppose because regular journalists aren't willing to do it. That's speculation on my part. And notice that this is funded by Chan Zuckerberg, by the way.
You have talked about this writer and his lack of understanding of this medical information, and I would argue lack of understanding of basic journalism tenets, because he has sources that are far from sources. It says simply in one of his paragraphs, it says, according to one recent study, but then never references what study he's talking about. There's no source. It just says, according to one recent study. And then the next sentence, it says, there's talk that it may soon lead to a round of Nobel Prizes. Is that another source there? There's talk. I mean, this was painful to look through this article and scratch it all up with the lack of sources and then the contradictions. Another thing that I happen to notice is when he talks about your background in this mRNA technology, it says, if that's true, but then and actually the next paragraph, he doubles down, says self-described, but then the third paragraph, but there is a case for his involvement. So it's like, you just said that your background isn't there, but then the very next paragraph, you say and admit that it is there. I mean, this has got to be frustrating for you personally to read something like this, where there's him attacking you, but then admitting as the article goes along that you can make a case.
Furthermore, Christy, he cites he's had full access to all the documentation, okay? There are reams and reams of documents, patent disclosures, patents issued, patents filed, correspondence between scientists. He has had access to all that. And he comes out and he says he only cites 2 academic manuscripts and neglects to cite the 9 issued domestic U.S. patents, let alone all the worldwide patents.
You know, I did happen to notice that was not included, and it is frequently not included when anyone is trying to talk about you. They fail to mention that part. And again, he says self-described, and if that's true, but then again in another paragraph, he was the first author on a 1989 paper demonstrating how RNA could be delivered into cells, and goes on to say how that developed into this vaccine technology. So it's just a big bunch of contradictions.
I mean, I read this. Once upon a time, I used to enjoy reading Atlantic. The Atlantic had some really good writers, and a senior editor that I still respect, who is on the masthead but doesn't write much for them anymore. But then apparently it got sold to Mr. Jobs, Steve Jobs' wife, who controls it. And now they have this pool of capital from Robert Wood Johnson and Chan Zuckerberg that is the capitalizing this piece. If I was the editor-in-chief of Atlantic Monthly, I would really be embarrassed by this. But it's not the journal that it once was. And this is very reminiscent of the 5 different attack articles that have been written to me about me by Logically. This is the Logically.ai firm in Great Britain. It also hires these young folks that have not been through any journalism training to write smear pieces under funding provided by Facebook and by Robert Wood Johnson and these other ostensibly medical support organizations that seem to be all in on slandering scientists. And it's not just me. None of these pieces actually attack the logic. If you look through this thing, it is one great big character assassination, but then it concludes in a paragraph with a quote from my colleague Stan Gromkowski that is a little mind-bending. The last paragraph basically refutes everything above and reprimands me for speaking out because I'm blowing my chance for a Nobel Prize.
Yeah, it's crazy. And the thing is this is a character assassination piece, but then it's like he can't get away from the truth, because it makes you wonder if when they write these pieces, they count on people only reading the headlines and only reading the first half of the paper, because he basically character assassinates you. But then throughout the article, there's a sentence here: in addition to being a medical doctor, he served as a vaccine consultant for pharmaceutical companies. Malone was involved in groundbreaking work related to mRNA vaccines before it was cool or profitable. So it's like there's truth interjected into this, but it's more towards the end of the article. And it's just like, do they count on people not being able to catch these contradictions?
Well, what will happen now if the other pieces are reasonably predictive is this will rise in the ranks of the Google search engine. And when somebody searches on my name, this will come up. So this will be high in the search results if they look for me. And what happened, for instance, with the Logically AI pieces that were used to attack me is LinkedIn. I don't know if you knew that I was kicked off of LinkedIn a second time. And another thing the young gentleman forgets to mention, and I know he's read it, he just chooses not to cite it. And by the way, I know multiple colleagues that he contacted that have told me that he made no use of the information they gave him. Okay, but in the case of the being kicked off of LinkedIn, he neglects to mention that I got a letter of apology from Vice President LinkedIn. And then the second time, recently, LinkedIn kicked me off. I wrote to the same vice president, and he told me that the reason why they did it was because of one of the Logically AI pieces, which said that I was not the inventor of mRNA vaccines and that I was a liar. Okay, and so this was the justification. It was nothing that I had posted on LinkedIn. It was them, whoever the censors are in LinkedIn, reading this piece written by a guy that looks like he's 23, doesn't have an undergraduate degree, lives in Alaska, and calls himself a dog and a drunk. I mean, that's what's in his profile. He likes to drink and he calls himself a dog.
Oh, wow.
So what happened? So then I write to the vice president and I say, what's going on? He says, well, it's because this piece is out there about you. And I said, well, here's the background. Here's the guy that wrote it. And here's his executive editor, who, by the way, until recently was a failed musician and a philosopher. Those are his job titles. Again, he's got no background or training in journalism, but it doesn't matter, because once they get these attack pieces out, then the search engines promote them, and they're being paid by big tech. This money is coming from these large organizations like Gates Foundation, Robert Wood Johnson, Wellcome Trust, Facebook, etc. And they're paying these firms to do this kind of character assassination. And in my case, in that of the many other physicians now that they're doing this to, and there's a whole group of physicians in the UK that they've attacked, they're not refuting the logic. They're not even discussing it. They're just doing character assassination. That's the tool. And that's what I get from the paid trolls all the time. The Twitter feed now is well over 230,000 followers. The LinkedIn feed is about 9,000 to 10,000. And the trolls seem to be basically using the same statements over and over and over again. And they're always about character assassination. They're never about the logic.
Of course, same thing happens to me. But anyway, you raised a good point about the people that are making these decisions to take material off and to censor. In this case, you have somebody that calls himself a dog and drinks all the time, according to you, that was the catalyst for getting a doctor removed from LinkedIn. I think it's timely because we just saw Dr. Rand Paul, his YouTube video get taken down by a woman who is not a doctor. He is a doctor. So why does she, not as a doctor, get to take the words of an actual doctor off, who is an elected official when this woman is not elected by anyone. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So, yeah, and I've posted some stuff on my Twitter feed that your listeners may enjoy that traces what's happening now. And I just spoke at the Liberty Forum of Silicon Valley 3 days ago in San Jose about this. We've got a situation where we've got horizontal integration that's tying together government, big pharma, media, and big tech. And it's all about supporting the noble lie that everything is good and these are perfectly safe and don't worry and take the jab, and we should have universal jabs. As Peter and I laid out, this is not academic. This isn't a bunch of academics arguing about how many angels can stand on the head of a pin. Universal vaccination will drive the development of vaccine escape mutants that will be increasingly sophisticated in their ability to escape vaccine responses. And now, most recently, in the Finnish data, where Finland has about 90% vaccine uptake and yet is having a huge wave of infections. Paradoxically, the adjacent country, Sweden, that relied on the strategy that Peter Navarro and I are advancing, and that I think is what prompted this attack piece from Atlantic. Peter and I are advocating the precise strategy that Sweden has been using of vaccinating the susceptible elderly and not vaccinating the rest of the population. So this young gentleman just seems to be confused, I think is the kindest way to put it, and lacking in the necessary scientific background to understand the issues at hand.